also react more emotionally. They may also react more emotionally than in the past, or avoid discussion of the disease and its impact. At this stage, everyone involved is adjusting to diagnosis and thinking of the changes that are ahead. Denial is part of the disease for some. For others, emotions can be overwhelming. Talk about, come to terms with the diagnosis and the emotions you're feeling. The sooner you do that, the sooner you can move forward and learn new ways to live a positive and meaningful life. This was difficult for Al and myself in the beginning. Al and I were both frustrated that he couldn't remember or do so many of the tasks that he could previously perform. I realized we needed help. We ended up in a counselor because our relationship was that important to us. She helped us realize that we didn't have all the techniques that we needed to be able to communicate with each other without getting angry. So we came to realize that continuing to communicate through the process and letting each other know how we were feeling at the end could bring us closer and help both of us to adjust easier. I believe that speaking out about Alzheimer's disease also gave Al a purpose in life after his diagnosis and made him feel useful. In our first video, Martha Tierney, who is the Associate Director of Volunteer Research Programs for the Alzheimer's Association National Office, will tell us about how to be helpful in the early stage.
Communicating in the early stages of dementia with the person with the disease is important. At that time, you still have language as a tool, so you can learn things about what they might prefer as the disease progresses. For example, as the disease progresses, a person might have difficulty finding words. Caregivers often struggle to know what to do in that moment. Early on in the disease, you can ask. You can say, if you ever have trouble coming up with a word, would you rather that I jump in and give you the word, or do you want me to wait and allow you some time so you can find it on your own?
Keep your sentences direct and straightforward. This is going to help the person avoid feeling lost in a conversation. Use short sentences and avoid long explanations. And whatever you do, don't talk down to him or her. Leave plenty of time for conversations so that no one feels pressured or rushed. The needs are going to change over time, but you need to meet them where they are today, regardless of the stage. Include the person in decisions that affect him or her. This can be empowering, engaging, and allow their preferences to be honored. The first neurologist that we went to here in Louisville spoke only to me, not at all to Al. So when we left, even Al noticed that fact and felt totally left out. Incidentally, we never went back to that neurologist again. But also, Al and I toured many memory care facilities early on so that he could see where he may be staying in the future. It also helped me to know what was important to him in choosing a facility. Avoid making assumptions about the person's ability to communicate. Each person is affected differently. In the beginning, I assumed that Al wasn't hearing me, when actually he wasn't able to process what I was saying as quickly as I was speaking. Speak directly to the person if you want to know how he or she is doing and thinking. Communicate in a way that is most comfortable to them. Is it through emails, letters, phone calls, in person? And laugh together. This is so important. This will lighten the mood and make communicating easier and relieve a lot of stress. Al never lost his sense of humor. It became a little cornier, but it was still there. For instance, if I couldn't remember something, he would tell me that I was laying my head too close to his at night. Or if somebody said to him that it was good to see you, he'd answer back, good to be seen. Be honest and frank about your feelings. Your friendship or love and support are so important to the person with dementia. Don't pull away. Middle stage or moderate stage is some changes you may notice. If you notice changes in communication in the early stage, these changes will probably be more pronounced in the middle. Some of the changes you may notice would be increased difficulty finding the right words or difficulty organizing the words logically, using familiar words repeatedly. They may revert to speaking a native language or they may use curse words. If they were not a person who swore before, this is due mostly because of the frustration of the disease. Al rarely swore, but after getting Alzheimer's, I heard words that came out of his mouth that I had never heard from him before. And the first time he called me a nasty name, I burst out crying. I was so hurt. Almost immediately, he asked me why I was crying. And when I told him what he called me, he was shocked and said he would never say that. So I just agreed with him and let it go because I knew it wasn't him talking, but the disease. Inventing new words to describe familiar things, easily losing their train of thought, or difficulty following a conversation or a TV program. I discovered this by accident one evening when we were watching Law and Order. When it was over, Al turned to me and said that he sure was glad that the police shot the bad guy. But in fact, the good guy was the one that was shot. So then I knew that he wasn't able to follow the storyline. Speaking less frequently. They'll rely on gestures instead of speaking. Pointing to things may become common. One thing I learned from our neurologist was that the more intelligent a person is, the longer they can usually speak. This is due to the fact that they have a larger reservoir of words to draw from and can substitute one word for another. Communicating through behavior rather than words more often. Difficulty decoding what others say. Changes in the brain make tracking and decoding words more difficult. So they begin to use behavior to communicate more often in the middle stages. Next, we'll discuss the adjustments you can make to help you continue to connect with the person with Alzheimer's. But please note that if any of these changes occur suddenly and dramatically, to consult your doctor. There may be underlying medical conditions and medications that need to be addressed. In our next video, Beverly is going to share advice she gives to caregivers as a support group facilitator.
I would advise couples, and I usually do advise the caregiver who comes to the group and is caring for a spouse, that you take your time. Always count to 3 before you respond, because it gives you time to think about your answer and what's going on. Generally, in a marital dispute, it's quick. It's back and forth. You're quick to give an answer. When they've been diagnosed, to sit back and say, okay, you're supposed to be the one that's reasonable here. Let's change how we do this, because there's only one thing you can control, and that's you. You cannot control them and their process.
Again, taking time to allow the person to answer is so important. You can't expect that person with dementia to behave as he or she might have in the past with a reasonable response. If you're not getting the desired response, focus on what you can change. Focus on what you can change in what you are doing to alter the situation. Like Beverly said, you can only control you. Don't ever argue with a person with dementia. You're never going to win, and all that's going to happen is you're both going to get frustrated. Always approach the person gently when communicating with a person in the middle stage. Approach from the front at eye level. Call the person by name. Say who you are to help orient that person and get his or her attention. Maintain eye contact and get at eye level if seated or reclining. I would always go around to the front of Al's wheelchair and bend down so that I was looking right in his eyes. And although I was his wife and I knew that at this point he knew me, I would say, "Hi, it's Barbara." Also, a touch on the shoulder not only gets attention, but puts the person at ease. Avoid criticizing or correcting. This is only going to backfire most of the time. Pay attention to your tone and facial expressions. The person can feel your tension or your patience, whichever the case may be. Again, take your time to communicate. Give yourself and the person you're talking with enough time to respond, interact, and connect. This will take longer than ever before. So in the next video, Rebecca is going to talk about adjusting her own thoughts and responses when her mother repeated herself.
She could sense my frustration because occasionally I would lose my patience and I would bark at her. Why are you asking me that question again? I just answered that question 2 minutes ago. And then she would get frustrated because, she was very old school and she's like, don't disrespect me. And I didn't ask you that question 2 minutes ago. It's a new question. So phase 2 of our relationship was like, okay, that's a new question. I'll answer it again.
It can be very frustrating for everyone when someone with dementia repeats questions, statements, or behaviors. Many times I would end up saying things that were not helpful at all. Like, don't you remember? One day when he angrily answered back, no, I can't remember. I have Alzheimer's. Remember? I came to realize how hurtful my question had been, and I vowed to never say it again. Also, rather than trying to convince the person of how you remember something happening, it helps to accept that the person does not remember it as you do. Accept his or her perspective and respond from that standpoint. Join the person's reality. When you do this, you take a little time to see the world as he or she sees it right at that moment. When you see this from his or her perspective, that person's behavior often becomes understandable to you. Due to the changes in the brain that accompany the disease, the person will probably not be able to see your perspective. So, like I said before, you will have to be the one who uses respect and empathy to see the world through his or her eyes. Assess the person's needs. Listen to figure out what the person wants or needs. Now, this means truly paying attention to both the words and the behavior of the person. Al used to tell me, you're so controlling, but I came to realize that this was his way of telling me his frustration, not with me, but with the disease. Let the person know you hear his or her concerns. Provide a brief answer or address any issue or concern briefly, or you're going to lose the person if you go on and on with an explanation. Before Al got sick, he used to say, I just asked him the time. I didn't ask him how to build a clock. Respond to the emotions behind the behavior. For example, if the person is communicating with words, you might say, you seem sad today. Are you sad? If the person says yes, you might try to guess why they're sad. Do you miss the way things used to be? And again, if that's a yes, you could add, I do too. If the person is communicating with behavior, see if you can identify and speak to the emotion behind the behavior. Hitting during bathing can be a way to indicate that they're either too hot or too cold. When Al was first placed in a facility, he was upset with a caregiver when she tried to bathe him, and he would call her an inappropriate name. This happened every night until I told them he probably is embarrassed and shy because I had been the only woman who'd seen him naked in 40 years. They switched his caregiver to a male, and there were no further problems. After you responded to the emotion, reassure and redirect. For example, if the person wants to go home, say that you understand their desire to leave, but dinner's almost ready. So let's eat dinner first, and then we can see what can be done later. Many times the person forgets their agitation later. Or if they're complaining about it being too hot inside, maybe agree that it is a little stuffy and ask if they would like to go outside for a walk. To connect, keep it slow and basic. Use short sentences and basic words. Give short choices. Don't say, what do you want for breakfast? But how about, it's breakfast time. Do you want cereal or eggs? Speak slowly and clearly, one person and one question at a time. The more you slow down, the less resistance you will encounter because the person won't feel rushed or unable to keep pace. Rushing leaves the person feeling frustrated, inadequate, upset with him or herself, and then resistant. By taking your time, you will avoid frustration for everyone. Limit distractions. Be patient. Offer a guest or fill in words if acceptable. Again, if you already talked about this in the early stage, whether they want you to provide a clue or fill in a word, you'll be able to handle this when it arises. So to connect, give multiple cues. Provide visual cues and gestures. This will help clarify your message, but avoid sudden movements. This may startle the person and get him or her agitated. Write things down for the person. Now, this is a great idea. Unfortunately, it didn't work for us because Al would just forget to look at the list. And when he moved into a facility, they provided a shadow box. And one way I helped him to remember family members was I filled it with pictures of the family. And every time I visited, we would look at them and go over the names and talk about the good times that we had with them. Another helpful tip is to look through photo albums and talk about the people and places. Put answers into your question. Don't make your questions open-ended. For instance, it's lunchtime. What do you want? But say instead something like, I'm going to make lunch. Do you want ham or turkey sandwich? Repeat as needed. The person may not have been able to decode your message the first time, and repetition may help. Turn negatives into positives. Al would sometimes complain when the caregiver would try to get him dressed and cleaned up in the morning. But she would say, I know you're uncomfortable, but we want to get you to get ready for Barbara's visit. By saying in this way, she acknowledged his discomfort, but she turned it into a positive. Since he was always wanting to make me happy, he would usually comply with the staff. Quizzing the person or telling them that they know the answer, just try harder, brings on frustration. This is unfair, it's not respectful, and it doesn't work. It is much more helpful to give the person the information that he or she needs for the task or the situation, along with reminders as needed. In the Alzheimer's circles, we have an expression: the person with dementia isn't giving you a hard time. The person with dementia is having a hard time. To connect, respond empathically and reassure. Join the person's reality. Let them know you hear their concerns. Provide reassurance that you hear and understand, that you're together in this and that they are safe. You are there to help. And focus on the feelings, not the facts. Facts are far less important than feelings. We don't lie, but we use fiblets. Now, lies are damaging and can hurt people, but fiblets are told to keep the person from getting frustrated and at the same time acknowledge the person and what they're saying. For example, let's say the person says, when is my dad coming? When his father is actually deceased. So instead of telling him that he's died, you may respond by saying something like, I'm not really sure, but why don't you tell me something you really like about your dad? Go with the flow as long as everyone is safe. Find common ground whenever possible. Validate and redirect the person if necessary. Make any adjustments to the situation that are necessary, and then redirect the person to another activity if needed. As I said before, many times, they will forget their frustration. Changes in the late stage or the severe stage may include communication being reduced to a few words or sounds, but it's still important to connect and communicate. By the late stage, the person will have lost many functions, and you may feel a strong urge to do something. Usually, your presence is more important than doing something for the person. Also, remember that the person is an adult with a sense of self that continues throughout the stages. So it's important to remember the person's history and preferences. Sorry, allergies. Another change you may notice is possible responses to familiar words or phrases. So to connect, listen for expressions of pain and respond promptly. Help the person feel safe and happy. Continue to bring respect to each conversation. Keep talking. The sound of your voice helps maintain a connection between you. Right up to Al's passing, when I talked to him, he would smile, even if he didn't respond or his eyes weren't open. Use all 5 senses to connect: touch, sight, sound, smell, and taste. Sandra talks about connecting with her mother in the late stage of the disease. Connecting through the 5 senses, can you get my inhaler? May be the way to connect that makes the person feel comfortable. Let's talk about those 5 stages.
I know that my mom feels aggravated. I know that she feels alone. I know that she feels confused. And I know on any given day, I don't know if I've made it better for her. I try. In these later stages, I've come to recognize that being really aware of the 5 senses is really important. Touch seems to give her a great deal of comfort. I know when I come over, I'm going to brush her hair. all the time. My husband noted to me recently, he said, you should see the look on your mom's face when you're brushing her hair. She's just happy. She's just happy. She doesn't say a lot. And I do it for a long period of time. I comb it, I braid it, I do funny things with it, but it just allows me to just be with her in a way that makes her feel comfortable.
So ways that we can connect in late stages through touch. Feel different fabrics and talk about how they feel. Identify shapes by touch. Lotion. Al's skin was very dry, so lotion always made him feel better. Identify everyday items in a bag by touch. Visit with animals. Sculpt using non-toxic materials. Hold the person's hand or stroke his or her arm or back. Now, we always held hands publicly and privately, so it felt natural to continue, and it helped him feel things were normal. Actually, it helped me to feel closer to Al. Connect through sight. Laminate brightly colored pictures to look at together. Watch videos of animals, nature, or travel. Look at photo albums together. View photos of famous paintings, favorite settings, or prominent people from the past. Go bird watching. Paint with watercolors. Go outdoors or sit by an open window together. We love the outdoors, so I would take Al in his wheelchair for short walks on nice days, and we'd listen to the birds and talk about the flowers or other things we saw. Connecting through sound. Listen to familiar music. Al loved music. He worked his way through college playing guitar in a rock and roll band, and his mother played the cello professionally. He always loved the musical offerings at the facility. In his last days, I played classical music from my phone. Just so you know, good facilities will schedule many activities with music during the month. Listen to sounds of nature. Identify musical instruments by sound. Listen to songs and speech in a person's native language. Read books, poetry, scripture, newspaper articles. I was so glad that the facility Al was at had current events several times a week, and they would discuss what was going on in the world. Let the person hear the sound of your voice. I talked to Al all the way up to the day he passed away, even though he didn't answer. I felt he heard me and was comforted by my presence and my voice. I could see his whole body relax. Connect through smell. Make small plastic bags containing items for the person to smell, such as herbs and spices, cotton balls dipped in essential oils, grass clippings or fragrant flowers, teas or coffee beans. Use fragrant lotions for hand massages. Cook or feed the person foods that smell good, such as apple pie or chicken soup. Another idea is candles, but be sure that the scent is one that the person likes and he isn't allergic to. Connect through taste. Well into the late stage, people with dementia enjoy tasting favorite foods and flavors, but as the ability to swallow diminishes, be careful to provide only what the person can swallow. I do have a funny story regarding food. Al loved to eat, and he really loved his sweets. So I was with Al at lunch at the facility one day when he reached over with his fork and scooped up a piece of pie from the woman sitting next to him that she had in front of her. When I said to him that wasn't his pie, he replied, "Well, she wasn't eating it." So let's summarize. Join the person's reality to connect. Understand and accept what you can and cannot change by learning all you can about the disease. Stay up to date with the latest information and scientific breakthroughs on Alzheimer's disease by attending workshops and conferences. Remember that the person retains a sense of self despite the losses of the disease. Demonstrate respect and connect through feelings. Always treat the person as an adult that he or she is. Try to decode the person's communications. Recognize the effects of your moods and your actions. Try to understand the source of reactions and help meet the needs while soothing and calming the person. Excuse me. You convey your mood through your actions and your tone of voice, as we said before, and that person will pick up on and reflect those feelings. So stay focused on your positive feelings for the person. In the next video, Dr. Fazio describes the multiple effects of not caring for yourself as a caregiver.
Taking care of yourself while you care for somebody with the disease not only impacts your own health, but it really can impact the person with the disease. So for example, if you're not getting enough sleep, you might be easily irritated, which will then sort of spill over to your interactions with the person with the disease and maybe being short with them, which then might cause them to get frustrated. So it's not only important to take care of yourself for your own health, but really for you to really be a good caregiver.
Caring for yourself may be difficult. You may postpone doctor appointments, not get enough sleep. You don't take the time to do things that you enjoy doing. You will provide better care, though, for your person with dementia if you are well rested and take care of your physical and emotional needs. A statistic that is quite mind-boggling to me, but very accurate, is that 40% of the caregivers of dementia patients die before the person they're caring for. That's 40%. After caring for Al for 7 years, I was pretty stressed out, exhausted from being sleep deprived, and my health was suffering from it all. Due to the stress, I had a stroke. Although I made a full recovery, I knew that I had to take better care of myself. So I asked Al's neurologist when would be the appropriate time to place Al in a facility. He told me that he would have been fine if I had mentioned this to him 6 months sooner, but he knew that I wasn't ready at that point. I knew I needed to take his advice, but I was still filled with guilt and uncertainty. I couldn't fathom others being able to care for Al the way I had all these years. But I also realized that I needed to face this reality. After placing Al, I realized that they could keep him safer than I was able to, and they could keep him stimulated more than I was able because of the various programs and events they offered. Alzheimer's Association has multiple resources of information and support available to you. The website, alz.org, you can get tips about finding and providing care, reading about the latest research, and finding tools for your well-being. ALZ Navigator helps you get answers by creating personalized action plans, includes information, support, and local resources. Community Resource Finder is a good search for local community living services, day programs, medical resources. This website helps you make contacts that you need to help to ensure safety and comfort. ALZ Connect online message board to share thoughts and questions and ideas with others 24 hours a day for both the patients and the caregivers. You can find others going through what you are going through. 24/7 helpline. You can call and talk with a dementia-trained professional anytime, day or night, every day of the year. Call on for information on the disease, how to meet the challenges, links to resources, or just a supportive ear. alz.org/find us has chapters all over the country where we offer education programs, support groups, and much more. To find a chapter anywhere in the US, go to this website, and from there you could search by the state or the zip code. And once on the chapter's webpage, you could see what is being offered in that area. Training and Education Center. Access programs just like this one from the convenience of your home. Now, there are also ways that you can get involved. The Walk to End Alzheimer's and the Longest Day are opportunities in your local communities to join together to advocate for Alzheimer's. You can form a team and raise money for services and research provided by Alzheimer's Association. I have walked for many years, and it's a great, fun experience. Last year was a little different because of the coronavirus, but we still walked, just not as a large group downtown. We walked in our neighborhoods, our parks, our workplaces, wherever was convenient. But this year, I'm so excited to say that we're going to be starting again from Riverfront Park, and the walk takes place in Louisville on October 9th, 9 a.m. So please go to alz.org/walk to find out how to sign up and walk with us. Be a volunteer. Use your knowledge and compassion to profoundly impact those affected by the disease. Some ways to volunteer, excuse me, also would be to join the Walk to End Alzheimer's Committee. Be a speaker at events like this to share your knowledge of the disease and get trained to lead a support group. Finally, Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching service that connects persons with Alzheimer's disease, caregivers, and healthy volunteers to local clinical trials. Al was in 2 clinical studies until he had to drop out of the last one due to his progression with the disease. We both felt he was helping to get researchers closer to finding a cure. Advocate. Speak up for rights and the needs of those with Alzheimer's disease and their families. You are their advocate, their only advocates. Help persuade state and federal governments to increase funding for research and programs. Advocating puts a human face on policy issues for our legislators. We both visited with representatives at the Capitol in Frankfurt to push for our cause. Al spoke before legislators while he was able to tell them the impact the Alzheimer's disease had had on our entire family, and I spoke from the caregiver's viewpoint. So I welcome you to join in making a difference and help change the course of Alzheimer's for all affected. So here is our 24-hour helpline and web address. Now, one other number that isn't on the slide, but that I would like to add is our local Alzheimer's office in Louisville. That number is 502-451-4266. 502-451-4266. So this is the end of my presentation, but I would like to just say a few words. I know I made all this information sound easy, but caring for Al was by far the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. It took a toll on me both physically and emotionally. I felt I needed to do the best job for Al and all by myself for too long before I asked for help. I hated when I had to put him in a facility. Believe me, I felt every emotion imaginable throughout the entire process, from anger, depression, disbelief, to understanding and patience, and back to anger again over and over. This disease will take you on a roller coaster of emotions. But for me, the rewards were well worth the effort. To know that you are making your loved ones safe, happy for the moment, and at peace is so satisfying. Yes, I lost my temper sometimes. And yes, I was short with Al sometimes. But the one thing that can reassure you is that in a few moments, they won't remember the anger, and to them, all will be right with the world again. So I'd like to thank you for allowing me to talk to you today and share important information about Alzheimer's disease and my story. And I'm going to turn this over to, I don't know, Diane or Candace. Do we have any questions in the boxes, or does anybody have any questions now that they want to discuss?
Barbara, it sounded like Al was high functioning. And he was, how long before you started to see, I guess, the disease to really diminish him? You know, you said you would get angry, and the way that you talked about it, he was very high functioning, because I didn't have those. Well, I guess I did. My father was older, but my father and my aunt both, you know, they lost their battle to Alzheimer's, but I too can identify with what you're talking about. But the high functioning part, I guess I didn't see so much of that with my aunt and my dad.
What was interesting was that it was 2 years that I was telling him something was wrong, because he was forgetting appointments, he was forgetting people's names, things like that. And he kept telling me, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong. We went to a family reunion and our son said, you know, Dad, you've told me that story 3 times. So that's when he kind of thought, well, maybe I better get this checked out. We got the ball rolling. He was very high functioning. I don't know if I said this in this presentation, but every individual is an individual. Everybody's different. You'll never find 2 dementia patients that are exactly alike. Al was very high functioning in the beginning. And again, I think part of that is because of his intelligence. And he had a reservoir of words that he could pull from. But it seemed like he was probably more getting into middle of the middle stage to the late stage before he really became non-functional.
Okay.
So it, like I said, everybody's different. But yes, he was, I'm glad you noticed that he was quite high functioning in the beginning. Yes.
He was. My aunt did not want anything to do with her brother, and they were so much alike. We couldn't get her to even go see him in a facility because she just didn't want to be there. And I don't know if she recognized that they both had the disease or what, but I don't know. But anyway,
Well,
I'm just.
And it is very frustrating to go and see your loved one diminishing. And each time you go, maybe it's a little bit different or something else happens. But, and a lot of people, the frustration and the emotions is just too overwhelming for them. I can understand that.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening. And thank you all for putting up with my allergies. Finally, my husband came in with my inhaler and that helped a lot, but I'm sorry.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
You were good.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Well, I guess you did such a good job. Should I go ahead and end it tonight?
That's fine with me, as long as there's no other questions, because I'm willing to stay here and talk to people too if they had any questions, but whatever works. Maybe everybody just wants to get home and eat dinner.
Okay. Candace, Tahisha, should I end or?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, on behalf of AARP Kentucky, the University of Louisville Traeger Institute, and the Alzheimer's Association, I want to thank you for attending tonight. You will receive a recording of tonight's session in your email. Thank you again, and I hope that you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Barbara. Such a great presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.